Well, COVID-19 pandemic has caused significant disruptions to the world of sports. During the pandemic, the world's major professional sports leagues had to pause, and so sports TV channels could only broadcast old games and events. Because of this, live streams of eSport equivalents became a realistic alternative for fans. Now, we discuss some of these changes, as well as how traditional sports is gradually embracing eSports. Joining me is Olympic and international sports commentator Max Kluwer. Max, thank you so much for your time. Before we speak about these live streams of eSports equivalent, talk to me about just how the pandemic has changed the face of sports as we know it.
UNATHI, hi guys, and hello to all the viewers on Newsroom Africa. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's been incredible, and I think the ability to evolve and to move with the times has been absolutely critical during this phase. And we find that traditional sport, especially the mass events, the mass sporting events, your big cycling events, your big running events, and that sort of thing, has taken a massive hit. And one of the biggest losers there as well has been the charities, because charities rely heavily on sport and sporting events for fundraisers. Internationally, of course, team sport took a big blow from the get-go, and obviously, international competition just obviously almost ceased automatically. So it's been a big relook at what can be done, how it can be done, how safely it can be done during COVID, and the pioneers and the guys and girls and the people with grit and tenacity have really come to the front. Not only on the international side, but also the local side and the national event side.
And what has that done, from just an emotional perspective to not only sports players, but also, as you mentioned, this wide stream of stakeholders that were impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, mental health is a massive thing, especially for, athletes at Olympic level. We know that the 2020 Olympic Games was supposed to happen in July this year. That didn't happen. It's a 4-year cycle. A lot of the athletes really in incredible form leading into the Olympics. And then, that got postponed by a year, and hopefully that will take place in 2021. But I think mental health issues were most prevalent. And those were the ones that I think hit the hardest for the athletes, for the coaches, for the team management, for the federations, for the countries, because so much goes into an Olympic year, so much goes into that 4-year cycle. And mentally, it's a lot to deal with that you've now, especially if you're towards the end of your career, where you've done 2 or 3 or 4 Olympic Games and you've pushed for one more in 2020, and now you've got to keep going for another year. So mentally, definitely, I think that's been the hardest, part of this whole process.
Now, the live streaming obviously helped tremendously. Talk to us about eSport equivalents that came out of this. I mean, I know initially around about 2017, some sporting, categories had started, the eSports streaming and so on, but it must have really picked up now in 2020. And I know that you've also started something and have been very close to the Zwift series Tour de France, which is also some form of virtual cycling. So talk to us about that phenomenon, how that has helped during this time.
Absolutely. Obviously, gaming has always been massive, and it just continues to grow. But what you're finding is that different sports are now starting to adapt to that gaming environment. The UCI, which is the governing body of cycling worldwide, partnered with Zwift, which is a cycling gaming platform, for the very first eSports World Championships. So the UCI eSports World Championships were held about 3 weeks ago, and South African Ashley Moman-Pasio won the women's race, which was fantastic for us. And a guy from Germany, Jason Osborne, won the men's race. So that platform has certainly grown incredibly since March. I've normally, work on the live stream space, but since March, I've done over 72 live streams in that Zwifting and eSports environment. So it's certainly something that's picking up. It's something that's available to absolutely everyone from their home environment. And what's quite nice about it during COVID is the ability to be able to get onto the platform and talk to your friends. There's an app via Discord or whatever apps you're using to talk to each other, whether you're riding together out of Joburg in your houses or you've got friends joining you from the United Kingdom or Europe. The ability to be able to create that community experience, to be able to spend that time together in this Zwift world, as it were, which is this, this gaming platform, has been instrumental towards, I think, not only the mental health, mental health, but also the physical health of the athletes. And a lot of athletes keeping their fitness really well and keeping it up during this time.
Now, I mean, the way I know it is that your esports is more like, things like your PlayStation and gaming, as you've mentioned it. And then virtual sport is a little bit more different, where you have devices that are attached to some form of home device, like riding a bike, for instance. Maybe give us a little bit of a background in terms of those two distinctions, where we speak about esports and also virtual sport.
So the esports traditionally has been that gaming environment where, the guys are playing games like Minecraft and those sort of things. But the gaming environment came into sport where obviously with the likes of brand leaders, if you look at the likes of Garmin, and the brands that they work with, if you look at the likes of, all the big sporting stores and all the big sporting franchises, Bluetooth is just such a worldwide used platform. And these trainers are what are called smart trainers. You just take your physical bike, you click in the back hub of your bike into the smart trainer, you link up your Bluetooth. You then obviously pay a subscription to the Zwift platform, and you can then go and ride in the different Zwift worlds as much as you want during the course of that subscription. So what it's doing is, and what's quite exciting about it is that whether you're a social athlete or a professional athlete, there's something for you in that platform. And, you can go on a group ride, you can do a coaching ride or a training ride that your coach sets up for you. You can go and do races. So all of these different formats obviously make it more attainable and obviously more social. And I think that's what's been quite important during this time is the ability for people to not lose touch with each other, and also for the elite athletes specifically to be able to still put down, watts and power and be able to give their coaches something to look at and keep them in tune, should the Olympics in 2021 go ahead.
Now, you touch on something very important, and you bring in the social element, and it goes back nicely perhaps to the first question that I asked you about how has this pandemic changed the face of sport as we know it? Do you think we've seen a relaxed kind of culture from a competitive nature to more of a social and connection nature? Do you think, in a way, this pandemic is bringing people closer together and bringing that social element back to the sporting fraternity that we have not been seeing for a while?
Yes, definitely. I think something that's certainly come out of this whole pandemic is a sense of community, a sense of people looking after each other, people putting each other, first, helping each other wherever they can. And I think the communities in this gaming space, in this esports space, have been instrumental towards, things, as we spoke about earlier, mental health and just communities staying together and doing stuff together. We found on our Premier League South Africa Zwift platform that a lot of the riders were meeting each other for the first time on the platform, creating teams, riding against each other, and only come level 1 or level 2 did they actually meet each other in real life for the first time. So that's been quite spectacular, just to see the relationships formed through this gaming environment, through this esports environment, and then taking that relationship and taking it into the real world and becoming friends in the real world. So that's been quite spectacular to see, and the communities have been fantastic.
Now, we know that with this pandemic, a lot of people were affected economically. As an Olympic and international sports commentator yourself, I'm sure a lot of people in your own industry have been affected by this pandemic. How has it been for you? Because you seem to have at least found some niche to enter into and cope relatively. But for those that whose livelihoods have been affected, how are they coping? What advice could you give them?
Tina, it has been difficult. I'm not going to lie. It's been, I felt like, moving on to the Zwift platform and the esports platform, I felt like I'd gone back to university and started to study my degree again. There was a lot of work that needed to be done behind the scenes. And I think, what's happened out there, specifically with those of us in level 1, which are, the eventing platforms, the hospitality platforms, the accommodation, the holidays, and that sort of thing, they're still not out of it. There's just so much still going on. You find the guys, behind the scenes when it gets to sporting, the technical supplies, the lighting, the sound, the staging, and all that sort of stuff. These guys are really, really battling still. And even though we're in level 1, the work is still not coming. So it's been difficult. And I think at this time, it's so important to remember that you're not alone. I think it's so important to be able to reach out to those guys and girls and those brands and those corporates that you've worked with before to just say, hey, knock, knock, I'm still here. I'm still around. you know what I can do. We've got a good relationship. If that opportunity does come up in any way or form, please don't forget to contact me. I want to get back into it, and we want to slowly start building again. And I think what's also been quite good during this time is that a lot of those companies and those corporates that have only been able to come into work again at level one, is a lot of them have refined their businesses. A lot of them have really gone back to basics, got rid of any excess fat that was involved in that business, really are now running lean teams and teams that are very proactive and very keen to get back into business again. So I think just a shout out to everyone in that community. And we spoke about charities earlier as well. Charities have been a massive part of what has gone on during this lockdown. They really have suffered because they rely heavily on this environment that is entertainment, that is sport, that is celebration, and they're also really battling. So I think to everyone and anyone out there, just don't forget those people that have looked after you. Don't forget those people that have been good to you, and reach out to those people and get it going again. Get that little Kickstarter going again. Get a firecracker out and start staying positive and being positive, because you don't have another option. There is no other option. You've got to go forward.
And I think it's particularly important now as the country battles with this second wave. Max, it was an absolute pleasure speaking to you this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. That was Max Kluwer, Olympic and international sports commentator.